We're ready to go?
Yes.
Excellent. New York State Racing, Pari-Mutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 102 provides that the New York State Gaming Commission shall consist of 7 members appointed by the governor by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. 6 members having been confirmed by the New York State Senate affords the Commission an ability to establish quorum and undertake action. This present meeting of the Commission is now called to order. Ms. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
John Crotty.
Here.
Mark Gearin.
Present.
Peter Machete.
Here.
John Baklemba.
Here.
Barry Sample.
Here.
Todd Snyder.
Ms. Secretary, will you please have the record reflect that a quorum of qualified members are present, thus enabling transaction of business? Will you also please let the record reflect that Chairman Gearin is in Geneva, members Crotty and Baklemba are in Manhattan, and members Machete and Sample are here in Albany. Commissioner Snyder is traveling today and is unable to participate in the meeting. Please also let the record reflect that there are 3-way audio and visual communications between the locations. Chairman Gearin?
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and good afternoon, everyone. We have first on our agenda consideration of the minutes from our meeting January 26th, 2015. Minutes of the Commission meetings have been provided to members in advance, and at this time I'd like to ask if members if there are any edits or corrections or amendments to the minutes. Hearing none, Madam Secretary, let the record reflect the minutes were adopted as circulated. Next on our agenda is the report from the Executive Director, Rob Williams. Rob?
Well, I don't have much new today to report, but just a couple of updates regarding the Gaming Facility Location Board, the PETA report, and a few racing-related loose ends. First, the Gaming Facility Location Board has scheduled a meeting for this Friday, February 27th, at which their proposed agenda indicates consideration of a final report and recommendation on the 3 previously announced license recommendations and contemplation of a new request for applications limited to Zone 2, Region 5. Recall that the board had previously requested staff to prepare a draft request for applications for their consideration. Procedurally, should the board vote to adopt a new RFA, the document would then come before this body for contemplation. At the last meeting, the State Equine Medical Director, Scott Palmer, had mentioned that the staff report detailing the investigation into alleged rule violations and animal abuse by the stable of thoroughbred trainer Steve Asmussen was nearing its final stages. The report remains in process of editing and organizational revision, and we hope that it will soon be available for your review and action. And then finally, Dr. Palmer and I spoke extensively at the last meeting regarding the spate of breakdowns experienced this winter at Aqueduct Racecourse. Staff continues to closely monitor the situation at Aqueduct with regards to this recent spike, and our investigative review into the circumstances surrounding each fatality continues. The Stewart Transparency Initiative discussed last year is also progressing. Later this week, staff anticipates having a few weekly track report prototypes available for Commissioner review. If you recall, the concept was to publicly issue a weekly report of Stewart and racetrack activity. I'll circulate copies to each one of the members, and we would appreciate any constructive input that you might have. Mr. Chairman?
Great. Any questions or for Mr. Williams from commissioners? Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Rob. Why don't we next turn to rulemaking? The New York State Racing, Pari-Mutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 104.19, authorizes the Commission to promulgate rules and regulations that it deems necessary to carry out its responsibilities. And to that regard, the Commission will, from time to time, promulgate rules and rule amendments pursuant to the State Administrative Procedure Act. And today we have one rulemaking item for consideration, and I've asked Rob to outline the proposal. Rob?
For Commission consideration is a proposed amendment to an existing rule that would allow licensed charitable organizations to submit fees for electronic transfer. In general, Commission Rule 4624.9 requires any disbursement from a charitable gaming account to be by check only. The purpose of this historical requirement was to increase accountability of charitable expenditures. Each quarter, licensed charitable organizations are required to submit to the Commission a report of bell jar ticket sales. This report must also be accompanied by an additional license fee equaling 5% of the organization's net bell jar proceeds. The Division of Charitable Gaming processes approximately 1,500 of these reports every calendar quarter. Receipt of these funds by electronic transfer would aid agency and regulated party efficiency substantially by reducing the paperwork involved in the submissions, ensuring immediate crediting of an organization's accounts, and automating the agency's deposit function, all without sacrificing safety, security, or accountability. This proposal would also be an incremental step towards further automation of bell jar ticket accountability that would aid agency and regulated party efficiency. Staff recommends proposal of this amendment.
Great. Thank you, Rob. To the Commissioners, any questions on the proposed rulemaking for electronic transfer of funds to the Commission for special bell jar accounts? Any questions for Rob? Rob, my question is for smaller charitable organizations that may or may not have this capacity. You mentioned that this is sort of an incremental step. Could you kind of expand upon that? I think there's a range of capacity within the sector, and so I'd be intrigued for how this could burden them or advantage them.
Well, first, the utilization of electronic transfer would not be mandatory at this time. It would be something that an entity could choose to accept. But ultimately, what we're looking for is more of an automated process to follow the bell jar tickets as they move from a manufacturer to a supplier, from a supplier to a club, and then from a club to reporting to the Gaming Commission. The ability to automate this task and track where the tickets are in line, and also to help identify how long it takes tickets to move through each organization and get off their books, will allow the division to better focus their attentions on entities where there may be some lost tickets or issues relative to supply of tickets that don't end up being removed from the books, and thus increasing the accountability of this. This is just one step towards that automation. We had heard from many different organizations that they don't have a lot of automation in the facilities themselves, but we're endeavoring to make sure that this is broad enough so it could be, the forms and the materials that are utilized could be accessed through a community library or through home computers, et cetera, and enable that type of an activity to go and be utilized by organizations that may not have their own internal computer systems.
I see. That would make sense. That's helpful. Thank you. Any other questions for Rob on this matter? Okay. Well, may I have a motion then to propose a rulemaking for electronic transfer of funds to the Commission from special bell jar accounts? Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion's been by Mr. Crotty. A second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Our next item on our agenda is adjudications. And the Commission has just one hearing officer report for consideration today, and similarly Mr. Williams will outline the case.
On November 7th, 2014, the Bureau of Licensing declined to license Edward J. Williams as a harness groom. The denial was based on the grounds that Mr. Williams' experience, character, and general fitness are such that his participation in racing or related activities would be inconsistent with the public interest, convenience, or necessity, or with the best interests of racing generally. After Mr. Williams appealed, a hearing was conducted. The hearing officer's report and recommendation were delivered to the Commission Secretary on January 20th, 2015. The hearing officer recommended that the license denial be reversed. At a meeting conducted pursuant to the judicial or quasi-judicial proceedings exemption of New York Public Officers Law, Section 108.1, the Commission considered this matter.
Okay, thank you, Rob. The Commission duly deliberated and considered this matter and determined upon a 4-to-1 vote to reject the hearing officer's report and recommendations, with Commissioner Machete voting to sustain. And therefore, we sustain the license denial with our action. Okay, next on our agenda is new and old business. And before I call on new business, I'd like to just speak to the Commission about a personal interest of mine. As you recall, at my first meeting as chair last year, I spoke about my perspective. It was heightened during my confirmation process in and around the issue of problem gambling. To that end, I asked the Commission staff to be proactive and to put together a learning forum, which we did thanks to the excellence of our Commission staff last year. We conducted our first forum in April, where we brought colleagues from New York's Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse together with experts, national and international experts, coming to Albany for a full day, addressing in and around the issues of problem gambling, and a discussion of best practices to approach prevention and treatment. March is National Problem Gambling Awareness Month. So I think it's timing that we return to this important issue. I was struck at last year's forum, a speaker from the National Council on Problem Gambling urged people to, in their words, have the conversation with regard to problem gambling. And I think we should effectively start the conversation and continue the good work from our hearing and the findings that we had last year. I think we could explore the collective resources and the combined expertise that exists, certainly within the Commission and colleagues with the Responsible Play Partnership, New York's Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services, and New York's Council on Problem Gambling. Perhaps to host public forums around the state aimed at breaking down the stigmas surrounding problem gambling and charting a path to treatment and exploring better ways to provide education and awareness on this important issue. But before we proceed on this, and given my own personal interest, I want to report to the Commission and ask, is this, with your concurrence, something that we'd want to undertake as a Commission?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Great. Terrific.
Well,
I know,
commend your
Commissioners.
efforts, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you. And
just speaking for myself, whatever support you need, anything that I could do to assist, I think it's a very important issue. I'm glad you've taken this on.
thank you. Thank you for attending last year in Albany as well, Commissioner. Any other comments? So I think I would like to ask Lee Park, who's so able to work with us and coordinate such an endeavor that I think will really serve us well as we go into the next stage of our work. So thank you for that. Secondly, under new business, we'll be establishing liaison roles for commissioners to the Office of Internal Audit. So I invite your engagement with this for 3 commissioners serving in this important role as liaisons to the Office of Internal Audit. If you're interested in this, please let me know and we'll report at our next meeting. But this will be an important next step in our governance. And then finally, from my agenda here, till we turn open to any new business, I'd like to call for a discussion of the Gaming Facilities Location Board's consideration of issuing a new request for applications to Zone 2, Region 5. As everyone is aware, Governor Cuomo wrote to the Commission and to the Gaming Facility Location Board asking all to consider issuing a new RFA that has the practical effect of seeking applications from the authorized counties that comprise the southern tier. So in general, I'd just like to gain a sense of whether members are willing to entertain the new process. And I open up that conversation to my fellow commissioners.
Well, as I said earlier, I'd like to see the report from the siting board before making any determinations, and I understand it's coming out fairly soon.
Understandably, absolutely, and I would agree with that. Any other perspectives as we respond and anticipate the work of the Facility Location Board? Okay. Well, from an operational perspective and aspect, from our meeting in March 31st, 2014, the Commission will eventually have consideration of a proposal to adopt the new request for applications to develop and operate the gaming facility in New York State. As Rob mentioned earlier, the Location Board will be considering a draft RFA at their meeting this week on Friday, and that will be circulated as it's complete. And it's my understanding that all forms and rules that were previously adopted are applicable to the new RFA process that will not have to be reviewed for our consideration. So any other discussion or questions to Rob or anyone on the process? Otherwise, I would entertain any new business for us to continue to consider. Any new business for the commissioners?
No.
No.
Okay. Rob, anything else that you wanted to add before we conclude with wrapping up here?
No, other than when the Gaming Facility Location Board does release their report this Friday, I'll make sure that everyone promptly gets a copy in their inbox.
Okay. Any old business to consider for the commission? Well, then our next agenda item is scheduling the next meeting. And consistent with our practice, the next meeting would be March 23rd, which is the fourth Monday of the month. And please advise Ms. Buckley of your availability for that date. So with that concludes our published agenda. Any other commissioners have any other items for consideration? Just looking at both locations here, I don't see anything happening. So, well, hearing none, then this meeting of the New York State Gaming Commission is officially adjourned, and I thank you all very much for your participation in the multiple sites here. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.